Hi there, I'm Chris if you don't know me, and I'm here in Hope Chapel on a Wednesday afternoon, and I'm bringing the Sunday teaching. Really strange. We've been so used to either speaking live to a group of people gathered in the building here, or for the last year, we've been doing a kind of live stream service each week where even though we can't see everyone, we're all together on the same digital platform at the same time, or catching up, a lot of us are. What we're trying out now for the next month, for the month of May, is putting out a podcast with a talk on the Wednesday of each week that you can watch or listen to at a time that works best for you. And then we're gathering as church on a Sunday afternoon at 4:00 outside Hope Chapel. And there'll be different children's and youth and adult settings where we can come together, and partly what we can do is we can process what we've been listening to in the teaching, and we can pray together, and we can encourage each other, and we can worship together. We'll also have some live stream music worship going on as part of those Sunday afternoons. So this is the first of those. And again, for me right now, it feels a bit strange on a Wednesday rather than a Sunday. But our goal is to grow as followers of Jesus, isn't it? And so we're using the opportunities that COVID has given us to press into how can we grow through this rather than just survive. How can we mature as Christians, as followers of Jesus, through the opportunities that give? So this is another opportunity now, and hopefully that by watching or listening to this teaching at a time that works for you, we can dig into it, and we can feed on it in our different settings in different ways, so that we can be encouraged and built up as a church. So our theme for these next 4 weeks, going through the month of May, our community, and it's kingdom community. I was sitting outside Hope Chapel on Sunday this week, Sunday afternoon, with 3 or 4 or 5 other people around a coffee table, and it was weird. It was good weird, but it was strange. These people aren't from my household, and yet we're sitting around the same table. We're all appropriately distanced and all that, But it was, but there's a strangeness, isn't there, to the coming out of all of the restrictions and the constraints. And I think also through this time, through the last year, we've come to really recognise what power there is in community, and our being together as followers of Jesus, as Christians, is such a vital thing. And so what we're doing in these 4 talks is we're digging into kingdom community, and we're called to be a community together. What does that mean? What fresh things can we see about that as we look at the scripture coming out of this COVID context? So to start us off today, I'm going to be looking at 3 different bits of the New Testament, and looking at how we're called into community, and then we're sent as community, and then thirdly, as we encourage each other as community. Those 3 things, and kind of weaving into that a bit of how we're moving forward as Hope, and looking at the examples of Jesus and the disciples and what he taught. So to start us off, called into community. And Alice and I have been watching this kind of box set, The Chosen. Have you seen that? It's available on YouTube and through an app. And it's really a kind of almost, it's not a Netflix quality, but it's pretty, it's pretty good quality. Box set type thing, which is going through the Gospels. And what's so good about it, I think, is that it kind of gives a bit of a backstory to lots of the characters, stuff that is detail that we don't see in the Bible. So it will tell us a bit of it will make up a backstory for Matthew, the tax collector, for example, and it makes up a backstory for Peter, one of Jesus' disciples. And this is all that's fictional stuff alongside the stuff that we know is actually happened from the Bible. But having that really helps it to come to life, and just like often reading the Bible in a different translation, or I was talking with Paul Gibson today, and he was talking about having different people bring teaching, helps you to see God and life in different ways. And likewise, watching The Chosen on screen makes me read the Bible and think about the Bible again in a fresh way. And so to start off with on community, we're people that are called into community. And you see this really well in The Chosen, when you see that they sketch out Matthew as the tax collector. So he's the Jewish guy who has really turned from his people and is sided with the Romans by working for them to collect taxes from the Jewish people. And then it kind of makes up this background for Peter, where Peter is this indebted fisherman whose business has been struggling, and he's made some bad life choices and hasn't had enough finance and money to pay his taxes. So you've got this conflict between Matthew, who's turning the screw, saying, Peter, you've got to cough up or go to jail, and Peter, who's furious with this guy, who's turned to the dark side almost, and is trying to extract money from him. And then Peter's called first to follow Jesus, and he's just blown away by that calling on him. And then Matthew's called also, and Jesus has called both of them. And you've got these two guys who, would never have said a kind word really to each other, suddenly called into to following Jesus together. And you see some of the tensions in that relationship as they follow Jesus together. And this is one of the extraordinary things. That's a little example of the calling to follow Jesus, the calling into Christian community, is that people are called from really different walks of life. And we are called from very different settings, with very different life experiences and life priorities, very different social networks and social groups. And we're called out of those to come to Jesus and follow him as our King and our Lord. And we're called to realign ourselves under his allegiance. Matthew's tax collecting stops being his identity and his kind of primary thing. Peter's fishing business. And those things are laid down, and instead they come together as brothers under this allegiance to King Jesus. And that's the same for us. I've just been reflecting on, us here at Hope. And I'm thinking I've got many friends within the Hope Church family who, if I wasn't a Christian and if I wasn't here at Hope, I probably wouldn't be friends with at all. Our paths wouldn't really cross. Our lives wouldn't really have much to do with each other. Might pass someone in the street, but I wouldn't get into the guts of doing life together. And that's good. That's design. Another amazing example of this is the letter of Philemon in the New. It's one of the smallest and kind of least talked about bits of the Bible. And there you've got this crazy dynamic where a slave runs away from his master and household and becomes a Christian, meets Paul and becomes a Christian. But also the master and the master's household are also followers of Jesus. So you've got this weird dynamic where Paul sends back this runaway slave and says, be united again with your master. And they're Christians, and all of a sudden the master and the slave, who was the kind of the dominant one, telling the slave what to do as a piece of his property, suddenly they're brothers and they're on the same level. And that's a crazy dynamic, which is a beautiful dynamic. Isn't that glorious? And so we're called into this community, which is where our old identity and our old priorities and our old lifestyles and everything else is laid down, and instead we come under the allegiance of King Jesus, and we become followers of him. And I think The Chosen, again, shows this very well. It's not a case of once Peter and Matthew start following Jesus, everything's suddenly fine. They're like, they're best mates. And no, The Chosen, and I think probably rightly so, shows there to be an ongoing conflict. I haven't got to the point in it yet where they're reconciled. I don't know if they are. I expect they will be at some point. But at the moment, it's still very raw. And actually, that will be the case for us within church community. And again, we see this with each other, don't we? Even with people that are like us, it's hard enough to maintain good relationships a lot of the time, and to put ourselves in a place of vulnerability and connection. Even people that are like us, but often we'll get offended by people. People will wind us up the wrong way. And the opportunities there are to press in to Jesus. Say, we come under your allegiance. We're worshipping you. We're following you. Teach us, show us how to be restored, how to be whole in these relationships. And we talk a lot in Living Free, of course, we run here regularly, about forgiveness and repentance being such keys to healing and restoring and forming good relationships. So it's not just a death and a lying down that comes out of this call and as we come unto Jesus, but also we're kind of given this new identity. And probably those gifts, probably Matthew's accountancy gifts or whatever they were, probably Peter's entrepreneurial gifts or whatever they were, they then come to Jesus and they're laid down, they're submitted. And what he gives us instead is, we call it our original design. We walk, as we follow him, into this new identity as a community. And it's lovely, just reading the book of Matthew. So this Matthew, the tax collector, wrote this Gospel of Matthew. And the way he writes about Peter is really good. He's not making snide comments and jabs, He writes from a place of peace and purity and celebrates Peter. And that's a wonderful sign of that healing. And Matthew recognises who Peter is. And he recognises the calling that Jesus has put on his life. And presumably Peter did the same for Matthew. And so we as we are called by Jesus, we let go of our old identity, our old way of doing things, and there's an appropriate death and a laying down of what we're about. And we come into this, and then we move into, what are the plans, what are the purposes that you have for us? And this is I think a real focus for us at Hope. We want to know, what are the plans and purposes that God has for you? What is your original design? How has God made you? And that will only be realised as you submit to Jesus as your Lord, and you say, I will follow you. I lay everything down before you. And then it's so wonderful when he gives us back the good works and the plans and the purposes that he has for us. And we as community want to encourage each other in discovering what they are and stepping out into those. And that kind of brings us really onto our next bit of scripture. So that was around the kind of calling of the disciples, this calling of this disparate, different group of followers of Jesus from very different lives and backgrounds and so on. And they're called to walk together. And there's many other examples of relational challenges and differences within that group of 12 and the others that they meet and minister to along the way. But so the first one is really the calling, called into community. We're called into this body, which is feels like it's not going to work. But as we come under the lordship of Jesus, it does work. And he leads us into healing and wholeness when it's hard. And then the second bit is what the disciples are sent out on mission together. And we see this in I think it's Matthew chapter 10. Jesus sends out the 12, and then we see him sending out the 72 as well. And so this is a little mission trip they do within the context of their kind of 3-year apprenticeship to Jesus. And they come back and they're amazed because they say, look, we've healed the sick, we've cast out demons in your name. And they've had these amazing experiences. And this is really the second thing of a kingdom community, is that we're a community that is sent. We're not just called to sit around coffee tables and have a nice time together and say nice things to each other, or just sort of enjoy the sunshine. Those things are good and important, and they're part of the journey. But actually, we're called with a purpose, and we're called to follow in the purpose of Jesus. And as we enter into that together, again, community is formed amongst us. It's that, I don't know if it's an expression, but it talks about the experience of having gone to war with other people forms you into a community and into a people of shared experience in a way that just coexisting together doesn't. when you've been through a trial with people, when you've been through a hard time and you've shared in that experience, we know that something is forged. You hear of it, don't you, from people fighting in the First and Second World Wars, for example, being something is forged amongst those that you fight with, and you discover things in that place of trial and challenge that you wouldn't discover elsewhere. So these disciples, they come back and they've been on this shared experience, and they've discovered God, and they've discovered the authority that they have in Jesus in really new ways. And these it's an obvious thing to say, but these 3 years of them walking with Jesus then set them up for the rest of their life, don't they? There were times of intense trial and challenge and being sent and being out of their comfort zone. And it's because they did that and didn't just stay in their fishing village on the edge of Galilee in northern Israel. But they left their homes to follow Jesus. They left the comfort, they left the familiarity of their people, of their extended family, to be sent by Jesus. And the same is true of us. Jesus says in the Great Commission that in the same way that he sent the disciples out, he's sending out all of us. And this is Matthew 28. I'm sending you to preach the good news, to show the love and the life that I've shown you to those around you. And that's something we can do in our workplaces, through the way that we through the way that we work, in our local communities, through the way that we love our neighbours, in our extended families, and so on. And we as church, as a gathered church family, similarly are a people that are sent together. And this has been part of Hope's history. So we're a 21-year-old church now, Hope, since it was reborn in this 200 or so year old chapel. And some of the probably greatest times that we look back on and remember with real fondness are times when we've gone to war together, when we've taken significant risks together, when we've done things like we'd look back and we'd say we're launching the 24/7 prayer centre. Look back at the years of living free when that first started, and there was a real growth and there's a real stepping out and a change happening amongst people. Those would be some of the significant risk moments that I think many within Hope who've been around for a long time would say that's when we really grew. Right at the beginning, when before I arrived at Hope, there were these breakfasts when I believe the church people would come and gather here on a Sunday morning. And dream about what risks could we take, what things could we do to feed the hungry in Bristol, or to help the homeless, or help people coming out of addiction. What could we do? And that is an important feature of Kingdom community. We're a people that take risks together, and we encourage each other. We recognise callings and giftings on each other, and we encourage each other, saying, "Yeah, go for it. Take the risks." We're a sent people. So that's the second aspect of Kingdom community. So firstly, we're a people that are called from our diverse backgrounds, and then we're sent. We join in the going of Jesus, and as we go, we take risks, and we're looking to go to places that don't yet know Jesus and bring his life and light and hope into those settings. And then the third aspect of Kingdom community, and I touched on this a bit already as well, is around being a people that encourage each other. And so in Hebrews, just read this verse here from Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24. And it says, "Let us consider how we can spur each other on towards love and good deeds. Let's not give up the habit of meeting together." Well, we didn't have COVID in those days, but we've been persevering, haven't we, anyway? As some of us are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. So it's about spurring each other on to take risks, to do good deeds, to do the works of faith. And Joy was saying in our One Church, One Day day on Tuesday, she was saying, felt God say that whilst we can't hug each other or touch one another at this time, instead let's encourage each other with words that build each other up and speaking words of life, words of prophecy, words of encouragement, words of original design to each other. And that's another feature of Kingdom community, is that we're a people that are really for each other, that know each other, and that celebrate each other. And yeah, there's I've received this week a card from the elders, and just encouraging me and saying some of the things that they saw in me, in my leadership. And this has been a weird time for me personally this year. And my calling to lead Hope has been, so how do we do this? What do we do through COVID? Actually, for a lot of it, I've actually quite enjoyed the challenge of seeking out God. What are you doing here? What's the opportunity for us to grow as a church through what's happening now? What are you saying? And so for me, I have enjoyed those challenges, and I've enjoyed the need to be creative and do things differently. But as we're coming to the end of the year, particularly with not seeing everyone and not being in the same room, and I sometimes wonder, am I just speaking into a void? Is this connecting with people? Where is everyone in terms of hope? Are we moving together without having that feedback of being together and sensing what people are saying as much as we can do when we're in person together? It's weird, and it makes me question sometimes, am I going mad? What am I doing? And so it was so encouraging to get a couple of cards from the elders, and just saying, these are the things that we see in the way you lead Hope. And I was like, oh really? Whoa, I need to hear that. I need to hear that, because it's hard. And that's the sort of encouragement that we need for each other as a Kingdom community. The encouragement that says, go for it. Alice's brother speaks Chinese, and there's I probably won't pronounce this very well, but in Chinese there's a phrase, "Jai lo." I think that might be right. Let's see how that sounds. That means add gas, and it kind of means I think it means kind of put petrol on the fire. Add gas, and I feel like that's a Jai lo moment for me, reading this card of these encouragements. And so that's another feature of Kingdom community, and we want to be that for you as Hope. We want to be the place, the safe place where you can come and where you can dream and where you can take risks, and we can discern with you, as your church family, saying, yeah, we recognise that in you, we see that in you, and we'll stand with you in that bold prayer that you're praying and these steps that you're taking. So there you go, 3 things. We're a Kingdom community is a called community, called to out of something disparate, scattered, different people, hugely varied lives under the allegiance of King Jesus. And then we're a sent people. We don't just sit still. We're called to take this life to others as well. And we do that as community. And thirdly, we're an encouraging community. When we gather together, when we're together, we're a safe place that cheer each other on. And I just want to finish by saying a little bit about the how. How do we do that? And I think a reflection is that, Jonathan Lee sometimes talked about the danger of thin unity. And by that, I think he meant it's easy to be in the same place with people, but not necessarily be deeply connected. And it's the same thing with community. It's easy to be in the same place with people, enjoying the same setting or surroundings. It's another thing to really go deep with people. And it's not something that we can just manufacture and say, hey, here's just 3 easy steps to being in a great Kingdom community. Actually, it takes more than that. And the disciples, it took them laying down their lives, didn't it? They had to leave their families in order to prioritize Jesus. He's not necessarily calling us to leave our families in the same way, but he is calling us. The call is right there through the Bible to die to our old way of life, to die to the way that we want to do things so that we can enter into his design and his plans. And that's not easy. That's not something you just do. Oh, I'll do that next Sunday, 4:00 in the afternoon, see you at Hope Chapel, dying to my plans for my life. No, it's worked out over time. And but then the other thing, hey, I'm just going to make friends with people who are from a really different background to me. And again, that doesn't happen overnight. It's not an easy thing. And there's unconscious bias. We've been really aware of racism, haven't we? Particularly over the last year, recognizing bias within ourselves and privilege and these sorts of things. And these are some of the subtle things that actually keep us apart. And it takes time and it takes investment to build a community that overcomes those barriers. So, don't want to give the impression that this is just something easy. But I want to say that the way we go about getting it is by diving in, being wholehearted, by saying, yes, I'm in for this. And I was tracking with someone earlier this week, talking about some life changes, and they were saying how they've been processing this with a few people within Hope, also within some stuff in the men's breakfast that we had, triggered off a whole, some teaching that Joseph brought there, triggered off a whole avenue of thought and pursuing God on stuff, and it's a whole mosaic, and then people from someone else from another church as well, a whole mosaic of relational connectedness, through which God has been steering this person into the way forward for them. So, encouragement here is, please come and, however connected you are with Hope, whether you've just recently joined us or been part of the church for a long time, it comes, the richness of community comes through diving in. That will be painful. There will be people that offend you, that wind you up, that sin against you, there'll be all sorts of stuff. It'll be costly, hopefully costly financially as well, in all of these ways. But the reward is really rich, because we're doing the stuff that Jesus has called us to, and his stuff is always fruitful. He calls us he talks about, dying, a single seed being planted, but then it bears much fruit. And that's what we can expect as we dig into this community. So a practical thing here, we've been thinking about Sundays, and actually we need team on Sundays. And so we'd love to encourage everyone who's part of Hope to come and serve the community, the broader community, one Sunday a month, whether that's being on a kids team, a youth team, a prayer team, a worship team, the different opportunities. But come with an attitude of serving. And as you serve, as you give yourself, then you will, you'll grow. And the church family will grow. Others will grow. And look to immerse yourself in the community, communities within Hope, or women's stuff, men's stuff, the different settings. Give yourself to it. Jump in, dive in, be wholehearted. And that's the way to go about forming and forging kingdom relationships. It doesn't happen overnight. It won't be a comfortable journey necessarily, but it will be a fruitful one. And it's an opportunity to grow and get to know Jesus more. And actually, what else would we do with our lives? It's worth risking everything for Jesus, the Son of God, who lived and he died and he rose from the dead so that we can have life and so that the whole world can have life. What else are we here for? That's the reason to live, hey? So we'll come into land there, and I'm going to pray. Father, thank you for this wonderful church. Just so grateful for this community of bold and brave disciples, followers of Jesus. I'm so grateful to be part of this community. And I pray that you lead us on as we come out of lockdown. Lead us and grow us and make us deeper and more mature as a community that will see your love and life come all around us. Amen.